Hey guys, it's Pride Month, and I wanted to share a couple of clips and offer some reflections on what this month is bringing up for me. The first clip is from a young Christian minister, and just to clarify, if you're not familiar with the term minister, it simply means someone who administers the word, which is the Bible, and the teachings within it. I'm still learning a lot of this myself. Christianity has all of this new terminology that can feel kind of alien at first, and I found that for many people, that alienness alone is enough to push them away from something that could be actually deeply healing. So, without further ado, let's watch the first clip.
My name is Haley. I'm a mental health therapist, and this is an example of religious trauma. And if you guys ever need to seek a therapist, including you, I really highly recommend it. It'll be okay.
I want to invite you to notice her energy in this clip. And this is really important in an era where people's energetic perception is opening up, and often they don't know what to do with it. And if your energetic perception opens up at a rate faster than your capacity, you end up in like psychotic episodes, schizophrenia, and all sorts of crazy mental health disasters. And if your energetic perception stays, like if you resist the opening up of your energetic perception, then you can end up living a life where you're like numbed out, disconnected, depressed, and struggle to find purpose, even though on the exterior, your life may look perfectly set. So it is important to like hone your energetic perception well and train it well. So firstly, just feel her energy. To me, it feels frozen, contracted. Her eyes are bulging out as she's speaking. And this is not to judge her on the size of her eyes, like I have pretty big eyes myself. But there is a bulging, energetically bulging characteristic as she's speaking. To me, there is also a passive aggression in her tone. Even while she's saying things that sound kind, like it's going to be okay, there is a split. There is a split between her words and her energy. And that split is worth tracking, especially if you're choosing a therapist or a trauma coach to work with. Because when someone's speech and energy say two very different things, like I hope you'll be okay on the surface, but their eyes and vibes say I want to fucking kill you, which is how I read her energy. I'm curious to see comments if you agree, disagree. That to me is trauma induced dissociation. It's a bifurcation in the psyche. And if you're sensitive to energy, which many of us actually are, if we don't live a lifestyle of numbing, you can feel that instantly. What I've noticed, and I've also fallen prey to this, is that when people speak from that kind of split, their strong judgments often reveal something about their own state. It's a kind of a projection. It carries a truth about their inner world, even though they're expressing it about the outer world. And yes, I'm making an evaluation about her here, and I don't think evaluation is inherently bad. I'm still sitting with the question of whether proclaiming any judgment at all is in service of bringing me closer to God or not, and I'll share some reflections about that at the end of the video. But this much is clear to me that it is worth sitting with the question, is your judgment showing you something true about the outside world, the inside world, or both? And this is where you can truly develop nuance in your inner work, sitting with that question. Every time you have an evaluation or a judgment about, and the way I distinguish between an evaluation and a judgment is that a judgment has more of a value hierarchy, and both could be expressed or held internally. And evaluation has more of a neutrality. Like the evaluation, you put that on some kind of a value hierarchy to get a judgment. So in this case, when she says, this is an example of religious trauma, I would offer that she's actually talking about herself and the space that she's in. She will deny that, obviously, if I present this to her, but her choice of phrasing leaves room for that self-referential truth. It leaves room for the self-referential interpretation of the pronoun this. If she were speaking from a grounded place, if she was not as triggered as she seems to be, she might have chosen more precise language. Language of the kind of like, hey, brother, I see you doing these things, and it makes me wonder if you've had religious trauma in your history, and that the unprocessed aspects of that trauma is bringing you to spaces like Pride, and interfering in it with your preaching of the gospel. And there would be like an openness, curiosity, and humility in that, but I don't see that in how she shows up. So this kind of split where the language becomes open to multiple interpretations, in my view, it's also a part of how dark forces work through language. And that's how the serpent speaks. And I'm getting a little like mythical here, and I won't go too deep into it. If you're interested in like deep dive mythical breakdowns of trauma healing, please subscribe to my Substack. I'll include a link in the description of this video. But back to her statement, this is an example of religious trauma. You might also read her statement as a comment on pride itself, which I think has truth in it. And I would be very surprised if queer folks who really identify with pride would disagree with this on me. Because as far as I know, pride and the sexual freedom revolution emerged as a reaction to generations of repression of sexuality enforced by the church. And there is a very interesting thread here of what do you do when you recognize something is a sin? Do you enforce it through authority top down, or do you present your valuation and then allow every individual to come to that conclusion on their own accord, or maybe come to a different conclusion altogether? Like, do you hold your evaluations of what is sin and what is not sin with respect for the agency of an individual? My orientation is yes, and so far the church has not done that, and I think pride was a reaction to that. So when she's saying this is an example of religious trauma, I wonder if she's also subtly, unconsciously expressing a judgment about the space that she's in addition to revealing something about her own trauma history. Like, I'd be very curious to, I don't know if I'll ever get the chance to explore this with her, but I'd be very curious what kind of relationship she's had to religion growing up. And yeah, let's listen to the man respond to her now.
Thank you. Yeah. Listen. Mental illness is oftentimes caused by unclean spirits, and
apologies first for the glitchiness. There is something going on with the performance of my laptop, but I wanted to start by sharing that, yeah, he seemed fairly grounded, sincere, and untriggered in his response, and that is how I saw his energy. And as regards to what he was saying, which is that mental illness is caused by unclean spirits, and Jesus is how you release those spirits. If you've watched my longer video on exorcising childhood sexual abuse, you'll actually see how a lot of cutting edge trauma healing modalities like internal family systems are circling back to these ancient biblical truths. And this is not just an ancient biblical truth. Almost every culture has independently arrived at this idea, which is that mental and physical illness can sometimes be caused by disembodied spirits possessing your being. If you're interested in this, you can look into Bob Falconer's work. He's documented IFS sessions that have resolved really crazy physical challenges through spiritual expulsion. And all of this is very edgy territory. This is not mainstream at all. The lady seems to me like a mainstream mental health therapist, so I won't be surprised if she's not aware that the cutting edge of her own field has reached a similar conclusion as to what this young man is presenting. And a lot of researchers avoid this area because it threatens their funding, but it is real. All right, on to the next clip. Okay, yeah, I want to share some questions that have been on my mind since I've seen this video. And I share this with tenderness for the very real harm that has been done to people who live a different lifestyle, a non-mainstream lifestyle, which kind of prompted the start of Pride a few decades ago. And I'm offering these questions in the spirit of like re-evaluating, like, we started something because the social circumstances were a certain way, and can we re-evaluate now what we have learned over those last few decades? Not so that we like abolish Pride, but we redesign it, reinvent it in a way that truly serves all of society, all of culture moving forward. So the first thing that came up for me when I watched this video was this image of baby proofing, like padding the corners of furniture and like keeping all of the sharp objects away when a toddler is learning to walk. And in some sense, for me, that made sense for sure, like a few decades ago, as LGBTQ culture and like openly expressing that you're queer was in its like toddler stage of development. Things have changed significantly since then, and I'm wondering, the question that I'm sitting with is like, when will LGBTQ culture move past the baby proofing of space? When will safety be rooted from within rather than engineered through external control? And I imagine there are already queer people who have landed in that inner safety, especially given how deeply queer communities are woven into trauma healing modalities, where one of the core emphasis is finding safety in your own being. And yeah, I wonder if there are LGBT folks in my broader network who resonate with this, who resonate with like not wanting to like baby proof spaces and require safe spaces for their existence. And at some level, I imagine to someone who's rooted in their sovereign safety, it might even feel disrespectful to have this baby proofing around. And maybe they're not as vocal as the ones who drive marketing for Pride. And if we haven't reached that place yet, I'm wondering if there's a threshold we are waiting on to declare this shift. And I know historically, like I said before, in the US and still today in many places, and note here that my questions are about the Western culture specifically. Like, I'm aware that in other parts of the world, there is a lot of oppression, and there isn't as much like support of freedom and sovereignty and agency as the US allows people, which is really beautiful, something really beautiful about the US. And kudos to the founding fathers and their visions for constructing this country that allows coexistence of such diverse personalities. Like, very, very different kinds of people live here, and I would say on average live pretty happy lives. As much shit as American culture gets from media, both American media and international media. But all the dogs start barking when the elephant moves on the street. There's like an old saying. I don't know if it is an Indian saying. Probably like an Indian saying. I don't think the West has had many elephants. So yeah, I'm aware that historically LGBTQ people have been killed for how they choose to live, often in the name of religion, which in my view is a very corrupted take on it. Like, if you need to sin to stop others from sinning, that just makes you foolish. You know what I mean? It's like, and one of the most beautiful pieces that I have encountered, pieces of wisdom I've encountered in my exploration of the Bible, is a very simple presentation of Satan as the tempter and the accuser. And I see many Christians going around in this like very accusatory tone and kind of shaming people, which I think is different from presenting evaluations and presenting and inviting better ways of living. But if you're like angrily like shaming people, I think that is a sin too, from my understanding of the Bible so far. And if you're killing someone, that's absolutely a sin. So it's like, it's pretty ridiculous. If you need to sin to stop others from sinning, like, yeah, what kind of a fool are you? And yet I wonder, do we have to reach 0 queer deaths for the safety logic to loosen its grip? Is that even a reasonable threshold? Heterosexual men and women die every day too, often from hatred, despair, and violence. Men are killed out of hate, women are killed out of hate. So is that like a reasonable threshold to set? And if not that, then what is the threshold where we can move past this baby proofing? I've also noticed that often there is a celebration of sexual promiscuity that historically has gone hand in hand with Pride, the festivities. I'm not making this claim about LGBTQ people. I am certain there is many monogamous, like committed monogamous LGBTQ people, and there is also sexually promiscuous heterosexual people. But the Pride festivities themselves, without a doubt, celebrate sexual promiscuity. And I'm also wondering if it is possible to evolve past that, or is that something intrinsic to queer culture? And are people within the LGBTQ world thinking critically about it? I would genuinely love to hear queer perspectives on the line between sexual liberation and sexual excess. Where does making up for the past begin to corrupt the present? Can excess still be sacred, or is it just dissociation dressed up as freedom? And yeah, lastly, I'll say there's something haunting to me about trying to correct shame with pride, like trading one poor human trait for another and calling it healing. And I wonder, what might it look like to grow beyond both? I'm not claiming to know at the moment. I have my own sense, but I'm just presenting these questions for introspection. And before I close, I want to share a scripture that's been staying with me, and it's especially relevant to this particular conversation that we've had. And it is Matthew 7.1 on judging and hypocrisy. This is from the Sermon on the Mount, which is the sermon that Jesus gave. I think it was like the first or the most important sermon that he's given. and it's like filled with like wisdom and at least like things to introspect on. Judge not that you be not judged. For with the judgment you pronounce, you will be judged, and the measure you give will be the measure you get. Why do you see the speck that is in your brother's eye, but do not notice the log that is in your own eye? Or how can you say to your brother, let me take the speck out of your eye, when there is a log in your own eye? You hypocrite, first take the log out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly to take the speck out of your brother's eye. Do not give dogs what is holy, and do not throw your pearls before swine, lest they trample them underfoot and turn to attack you. All of this feels like very relevant to this video, and a lot of what I've shared here around judgment, other than the scripture, it's not coming from some perfect place. It's coming from my own process, my own wrestling with how to see clearly without collapsing into superiority or reaction. And yeah, when I read the Sermon on the Mount and I come across this line, I feel really called to raise my own standards even further. And that's something I've appreciated about reading the Bible, is that many of the values I had already arrived at on my own around integrity, restraint, humility, they're echoed and deepened, which is also the flavor of the Sermon on the Mount, where oftentimes Jesus like references some ancient Jewish law and elaborates on it, and he like starts off with proclaiming, think not that I've come to abolish the law and the prophets. I have come not to abolish them, but to fulfill them. So he's come to like really get to the heart of what it means to live by these different laws. And yeah, as I was recording this video, I've been sitting with the question, what would it mean to never proclaim a judgment? Because I have noticed when I speak a judgment out, especially when I see someone in a split, like dissociated or mocking or bulging-eyed state, and I point to it out loud, and there is a choice I'm making there and like giving words to that, something in me seems to harden too. It's like speaking the judgment out loud can sometimes anchor those very same tendencies in me. The parts of me that also know what it is to be ungrounded, reactive, dissociated. And I wonder if that's what it's doing to my system, which is why the invitation here is to not judge. And perhaps me and everyone else needs to practice not expressing judgments for a while till our eyes are fully cleansed, and so that we can so then whatever we speak about the external world is actually only about the external world. And yeah, that's the reflection or inquiry that I'm sitting with. Yeah, thanks for watching and sitting with this. I know it's layered, and I'm not pretending to have all the answers. I'm just offering what I see and what I feel, and staying open to more. If something here resonated or challenged you, I invite you to stay in the nuance. These conversations matter more when we resist the urge to flatten them into outrage or dogma. And yeah, if you value this kind of content, it means a lot if you like, share, or subscribe. That kind of support helps me keep creating. See you in the next one.